walk-up music. My kids would be impressed. It's great to be here with everyone today. I'm Jon Oram from the Proskauer firm. It's truly an honor for me to interview David today. I've worked in the sports industry for 24 years, and I've been a big fan of David since before I knew that he had any interest in sports. As Rachel mentioned, David is co-founder and chairman of the Carlyle Group, but he's also, take a deep breath before I say this, the chairman of the board of the Kennedy Center, the National Gallery, the Council on Foreign Relations, the Economic Club of Washington, and the University of Chicago. And I only have 20 minutes, so I'm not going to give you the list of all of the other boards that he sits on. David devotes a tremendous amount of time to public service and philanthropy. He's a New York Times best-selling author, written 3 books, even though I have written down 4. I think you've written 3? 5, okay. Showing me up. And as the host of his own interviewing show, so of course I'm particularly intimidated by that. David must have had way too much free time on his hands because last year he led an ownership group that bought the Baltimore Orioles. So now David can add the title of MLB control person to his resume. So David, welcome to Sportico. It's a privilege to have the opportunity to interview you. We'll get to sports in a few minutes. Before we do, I wanted to talk about your incredible commitment to public service. Before you founded Carlyle, you worked in the government, including 4 years at the White House. And despite being a member of the private sector for the last 44 years, you've been one of the country's most prominent and effective philanthropists. So can I ask, what inspired that commitment to public service, particularly after the disappointment of losing an election?
Well, we lost the election in 1980. I managed to get inflation to 19%, which was hard to do. No one's done it since. And I haven't been invited back into government since the Carter years, so I really didn't have any alternative but to do something in the private sector. I came from very modest circumstances. Many of you did as well. And when you get to the point where you have made a fair amount of money, you can either build a pyramid to yourself, and the pharaohs used to do that, but probably that's not a great use of your money, or you can give it all to your children upon your death, which is what most people typically do, but I didn't think that was a great way to make children responsible and hardworking and great citizens. A lot of people who inherit a lot of money don't become as successful as people work their way up and get there on their own. And then you can give it away while you're alive. A lot of people wait to give it away to not their children, but to good causes when they die, and I didn't know where I'd be when I died, so I wanted to do it while I was alive, and so I committed to give away all my money as a signatory of the Giving Pledge. And you know, I'm not that unique. A lot of people give away a lot of money, and I just decided that it was a better use of my money than building houses or yachts or other things.
Was buying the Orioles an act of public service, or is that an investment?
Yeah, actually it was. I mean, the truth is, a lot of my money I've given away in Washington to fix monuments or memorials and other kinds of things like that, but also to my universities. I've been the chair of the board at Duke. I'm chair of the University of Chicago board. I was on the Harvard Corporation board for a long time, and I've given a lot of those universities a lot of money. And I've given a lot in the Washington area where I've resided for the last 40-some years. But I got a public school education in Baltimore. My parents grew up there. My parents were not college graduates or high school graduates. My father worked in the post office his entire life. He made a modest salary, probably under $10,000 a year. I was the only child. We had a small 800-square-foot house, 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, no air conditioning, no backyard. And you know, it was actually, at the time, it may not have seemed so wonderful, but it's a great character inducement because you realize if you want to get somewhere, you need to work hard. And I got lucky, and my parents lived their entire life pretty much in Baltimore until they moved to a suburb of Baltimore called West Palm Beach, Florida, right when they retired. And I felt that I got a good public school education. I didn't go to private schools, and I felt I hadn't done enough for Baltimore. And when an opportunity came along to buy the team, the current owner, the then owner, was not that popular for reasons not all of his fault. And I thought I could maybe inspire Baltimore and do some things to help Baltimore. And you know, that was really it. I don't want to lose money on it, but I'm not trying to make a lot of money on it. And I will probably own it until I die, and my children will ultimately figure out what to do with it.
We'll talk about that in a minute. How much of your time are you spending on the Orioles these days?
More than I ever thought I would. I'm not a gigantic baseball person by background, to be honest. I was a great baseball player at age 7 and 8, and then at 9 or 10, I peaked, and I was in a Little League All-Star, but it was a Jewish Little League, and so, so I really wasn't that good, and so eventually I decided I had to do something else, and I just paid attention to the Orioles when I was little, but I didn't. When I went away to college, my mother threw away all my baseball cards, and I just didn't really keep up with it. Now that I've returned, they've changed the world. I mean, they have these statistics I never heard of before. It used to be RBIs, hits, hitting average, stolen bases, things like that, won loss percentage, and something called complete games. A complete game is when you finish 9 innings. That's something that people probably don't realize what that is anymore. But now they have things called WAR. You have to learn that. Then they have something that sounds like a Little League kind of term, quality starts. A quality start, I didn't know what that was, but it means that you pitch 6 innings and you only gave three runs. So, it sounds like, like every Little Leaguer gets a trophy. It sounds like, you say you had a quality start. It sounds nice, but I didn't know all of this, so I had to learn it, and I've been learning it on the fly, and we have some really good people that were working at the Orioles, and they've been educating me, but I can't say I'm really that knowledgeable about baseball compared to virtually everybody in this room, or certainly everybody who works for the Orioles, so I'm kind of learning.
Well, as the MLB control person, you're responsible for every baseball and business decision that the club makes. I read an interview that you did about your time in the White House where you said that President Carter followed your advice about 97% of the time on domestic policy issues. So would you say, if I set the over-under at 97%, how often do you follow your staff's recommendations?
99% would be probably a pretty good answer. I'm learning the game of baseball, and I'm really a novice in it, and I'll try to learn more about how to run a baseball team. But we have some pretty good people. We've hired a really good person to run the business side, Katie Griggs, who came from the Seattle Mariners. Mike Elias has been our general manager, a very, very talented person. He won the award as the general manager of the year before last. And so we have some pretty good people, and we're bringing in some other people. And I have to learn. I'm just not an expert in this area yet.
Well, you teed that one up for me, though. 99% of the time, so I need to ask about the 1%.
Well,
can you give us some examples of times when you overrule the team?
Well, I would say that, sometimes like, for example, I had the habit of throwing out hats to fans. I wouldn't say that they thought it was such a great idea. Or one time I danced on the dugout. I don't think people thought that was the greatest idea either. Sometimes I went to do a splash thing that they have in Baltimore where you, some masochistic thing where you spray people when you get a hit, and you spray them with water, and they think it's fun. And so it's a big deal in Baltimore. And I did the spraying, and people seem to like it. I don't know whether it was a good thing for an owner to be doing that, but I did it.
Well, you're part of a new breed of owner in Major League Baseball with investment background, very high profile,
Right.
ultra net worth. You and Steve Cohen in the last 2 team sales. Up until recently, there were very few MLB owners who were well known to the public before they bought the club. Do you expect that trend to continue?
I don't know. There aren't that many teams that come for sale, but probably because, let's put it this way. I didn't want to buy a sports team for most of my career in the business world because I thought my investors would say, David, you're supposed to be managing our money. You've got, $450 billion of our money, and why are you spending time on a sports team? So when my friends started buying basketball teams and baseball teams, I said, your investors aren't going to be happy with you. You be careful. Well, it turned out I was wrong, as I am very often. And not only do these people make a lot of money on these teams that they bought at prices I thought were expensive but turned out to be cheap, their investors seem to be okay with it. So as I move further along at Carlyle, and I'm not the CEO anymore, I think, okay, I can do it. My investors probably won't be so upset. So I think there'll be more people like me who kind of say, okay, sports is interesting, it's enjoyable, it brings people together, and that's the point of athletic teams. It brings a community together in ways that very few things do. Baltimore is a city that's had a lot of troubles. When I was growing up, it was the 9th biggest city in the United States. Now it's not even the top 20. It was a majority white city then with a fair amount of prosperous white businesses there and white business residents. And now it's a majority black city, 62% black. Most of the corporate headquarters in Baltimore have moved out. And so Baltimore has had a lot of challenges in recent years. I'm not going to solve that problem myself, but I do think that other people who would like to help a community or would think that they can buy something at a reasonable price and make a reasonable profit while helping a city and giving pleasure to people is a good thing to do. So in Baltimore, for example, the Orioles are very, very popular despite, some bad 30 or 40 years. Last time we won the World Series was 1983. So it's been a tough time for Baltimore and in terms of the Orioles, and then they were lost the Colts at one point. They moved out of town in the middle of the night. So Baltimore's had its setbacks, and now I've been surprised at how devoted the fans are. Even though we've had some struggles in recent decades, there are people who come and they say to me, I've been a season ticket holder for 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. And, and people just are obsessed with the Orioles, and people just seem to love it. And so to the extent you can give people pleasure, it's a good thing to do. Now, what's the point of life? Why are we all here anyway? Well, as Thomas Jefferson wrote, about this country, he felt that we should have the pursuit of happiness. But he never defined happiness in the ensuing 50 years that he lived. But I think happiness is the most elusive thing in life. As all of you have struggled with, happiness in your own lives, it's not easy to achieve it. But one of the things that can achieve happiness is helping other people. And if you can help other people be happy, that's good. And one of the ways you can help other people be happy is putting a good sports team together. People have an obsession with their local sports teams. And you think about it, why should people be obsessed with whether a team does well or not? Because they don't own the team. They're not financially going to get that much benefit out of it. Why are they so obsessed with it? Well, they are obsessed because it brings pride to them. It makes them feel better that their local team that is in the same area that they live in is doing well. And it produces an enormous amount of happiness. And we see this all the time. So I think to the extent that you can be an owner and make other people happy, you are doing a good service. In my religion, we call it a mitzvah. But it's something that, it's a good thing to do. And now, it's not that easy to do because you only can have one team win the World Series, but I think I've just been surprised at how many people are so dedicated. And unless I went to Duke, as you know, and I was involved with supporting the Duke basketball team, and I saw the Duke basketball team and the Cameron Crazies be so obsessed with this, and I just couldn't quite understand why somebody wanted to send their child to Duke and dress up in blue and white paint to cheer a basketball team, but it was clearly the case, and people got happiness out of it. And I can see the same thing is true in the Orioles. People are obsessed with the Orioles' success, and they know the statistics, they know every player the last 30, 40 years. I'm amazed at how important it is to Baltimore, and the Orioles are probably more important to Baltimore than some other teams are to other cities. So some other large cities, they have a lot of other things going for them. Los Angeles has got a lot of other things. The Dodgers don't do that well. The Angels don't do that well. There are a lot of other things in LA to be happy about. Baltimore doesn't have quite that. It's struggled in recent years to become a vibrant city, and it's lost a lot of population, a lot of white flight. It's a challenging area.
Well, I'm glad we're talking about the purpose of life. I promised there were two topics we weren't going to discuss here. One was the election. The other is private equity in sports, because I imagine that'll be discussed in every other panel the rest of the day. I actually think, though, the more consequential development that we've seen in the last few years in the sports business is people buying LP stakes in sports teams. Decade ago, clubs had very few limited partners. We did a baseball deal 15 years ago, and we couldn't find any limited partners to go out into the club. There's a well-known quote about being an LP in the Yankees. There's nothing more limited than being a limited partner of George Steinbrenner. But you have an all-star roster of LPs. How did you decide who to invite to invest alongside you?
Well, when I reached the agreement to buy the Orioles, I wanted to have a team of people come in with me because I'm not a resident of Baltimore currently, though I live in Maryland. And so I wanted some people that were well-known in Baltimore. Some people are well-known as being Orioles supporters, and a diversity. So I asked Kurt Schmoke, the African-American mayor of Baltimore, who I grew up with, and a very talented person, Yale graduate, Rhodes Scholar, Harvard Law School graduate, a three-term mayor of Baltimore, and worked with me in the White House. He was not responsible for inflation, so he didn't get blamed for that. I asked him to join, and he did. Grant Hill, who I know from Duke quite well, I asked him to join, and his father grew up in Baltimore, and so he joined. I asked a number of other people, the women who were from a number of women, their names won't be as well known as others but women who are from Baltimore or live in Baltimore are join. And I wanted to have a diverse group, and we do have a diverse group of people that join, and it represents the community, and obviously not completely because we don't have a lot of poor people that have invested, but we have people who, represent the gender and racial diversity that I think is appropriate. So I think it's a good group, and in terms of being a limited partner, yes, it was John McMullen that made that famous statement.
Right.
And there's no doubt that being a limited partner in many sports is what people often say is you're basically a season ticket holder. You get the right to go to season ticket. You get the right to go to all the games and so forth. I think it's changed a little bit. I think people give their limited partners a little bit more than maybe was once the case with George Steinbrenner. And I would say that people are very happy with it, with being a limited partner. People call me all the time and see if they can still invest. So I think being a limited partner is a growth business in sports. And as we know, there are now funds that basically just invest in sports franchises only as limited partners. And their big promise to the general partner is, I won't bother you too very much. I'll leave you alone. And that's
They don't always say that.
Well, that's one of their sales pitches to the general partners. But I think it's not there are worse developments in the Western world than having limited partners by sports franchises. I think it's not a sin or anything like that. So I think it's a trend that will continue. And as we've seen, the NFL is now letting private equity firms buy minority stakes. And I suspect you'll have sovereign wealth funds doing the same at some point, being permitted to do so. And I suspect you have more foreign investors join. And eventually, I suspect you'll see these franchises go public. So the inevitable trajectory of the investment world is you buy a company and then you maybe add some partners to it. You may merge it, you grow it in some ways, but eventually you tend to go public. And I suspect at some point, 10, 20 years from now, most of these major league franchises will be public in one form or another. That'd be my guess.
Yeah, I think the trend is going to start in less than 10 or 20 years, but I think for sure we're expecting more and more public teams in the next few years. So before we go, you mentioned earlier that you're one of the original signers of the Giving Pledge. Right. And for those of you who don't know, that means you've pledged to donate at least half of your wealth to charity during your lifetime or upon your death. I checked this morning, and while there are a few prominent sports owners who've made that pledge, like Steve Ross and Arthur Blank, very few of the 154 major league teams are controlled by owners who've made that pledge. So this would be, when you and I get together next time, would be a great topic that I'd love to discuss with you generally. But for now, can I just ask, how does signing the Giving Pledge affect the future of the Orioles?
It won't affect the Orioles at all. It may affect my children more than the Orioles. But no, and I should say the Giving Pledge is a voluntary type of thing. You say you're going to give away half your net worth upon your death or during your lifetime. But if you don't give any money away until you get ready to die, and then you don't give any money away upon your death, we can't disinter you and kick you out of your grave. So it's a voluntary thing. And we generally like people to give away money during their lifetime, but they can wait till they want, till later if they want. It's not going to affect the Orioles in any way, shape, or form because it's not relevant to the Orioles. So I've given away a large sums of money, and I've already given away more than half of my net worth probably, and so I don't have to give away the Orioles stake or anything like that in order to comply. But we'll see what happens.
Well, but I guess what I'm asking is, do you expect the Orioles to stay in the Rubenstein family, or do you think that
I didn't expect to buy the Orioles 2 years ago, so it's hard to predict. But I would say I'm very happy as an owner. I brought in a really good partner, Mike Arrighetti, to help me. Mike has really built an incredible firm, Aries, and he's much more knowledgeable about baseball than I am for sure. And he's much younger than me too, so he'll be there for quite some time. And I think it's a good partnership that I have with Mike. We have a good partnership with the Orioles. We have a good partnership in Baltimore. And everybody wants to win a World Series, so we're focused on that.
So what was the answer to the question about whether I can still invest in the Orioles?
Can you still invest? Yeah. You're saying?
Yeah, or can any of us still invest in the Orioles? There's probably someone in this room who can afford it.
We finished the investment. We finished the investment. We're not rushing to get more investors, but we're well capitalized, and we have the capital we need to do what we need to do. So we're not stretched thin, and we're in pretty good shape financially.
Okay, so you've had your final closing. You've had the final closing.
Okay. Yeah. There's never a final closing, I've learned in the business world, but we're in very good we're in very good shape financially. So I'm very happy, and we're working on things, getting ready for next year.
Okay. Well, thank you for taking the time to spend with all of us today.
All right, thank
You've
you.
really been an inspiration
Thank
to me, and I hope many others listening.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.